P.A. Vishal Poddar, myself, Advocate IP Pramod Dokania, Advocate Amish Desai, and Advocate Avdesh Sharma. We are a national level boutique law firm specializing in providing comprehensive legal assistance and litigation support across a broad spectrum of practice areas. Our expertise encompasses taxation, both direct and indirect, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, PMLA, Benami transaction related litigations, corporate laws, including the Companies Act and Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which is IBC, SURFACI Act, and other statute litigations and legal services. Our firm is headquartered in Surat with branch offices strategically located in Mumbai, Delhi, Pune, Ahmedabad, Nashik, Vadodara, Faridabad, Gurgaon, and Rajkot. In addition, we maintain a robust network associates offices across India, enabling us to provide seamless legal services and comprehensive support to our clients spread across India. With that brief introduction, I think I would like to Shefali ji to give a brief update on today's topic before we start the deliberation.
Okay. Okay, so Pramod ji, have you prepared the PPT?
Yeah.
Okay, but I will brief you the PPT. So this is very important judgment, and I will say that some of us may be reading it in other way. So in some of the posts, I have seen that people are saying that even if there is a dropping of the proceedings under Section 74, the penalty for the other people will be as it is. I mean, it can be levied to the other people also. Now, the contention of issue is that in Section 74 itself, there is an explanation which says that once the proceedings under Section 74 are dropped against the main accused, then it will be dropped. It will be deemed to be dropped under Section 122 against the other people. So section wise go through, Pramod ji will do the section wise go through. So I'm just telling you the background of this issue. So in this particular judgment, there were lots of questions which were raised, and we will also have a walkthrough of the judgment itself, but I'm just telling you the issues. So the first question was that whether the penalty under Section 122 is of criminal nature or civil nature, and is it possible for the statute to levy both of the penalties? There is the penalty under Section 74 as well as penalty under Section 122. So till now, the understanding of all of us is that against the main accused, where the tax is payable, not payable, short paid, or it's erroneously refunded, or input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized, then for those people who are falling under any of these criteria which are mentioned under Section 74, the proceedings will go through the Section 74. And for the other people who are not falling into that criteria but are actually involved in that kind of fraud, the proceedings will be of 122. So they will be levied the penalty under Section 122. And interestingly, the penalty under Section 74 and 122 are same. So in Section 74 also the penalty is 100% of tax evaded, and under Section 122 again it is 100% of, I will not use the word tax evaded because there are different subsections of Section 122, and at some place it is the tax involved, at some place it is the amount in the tax evaded, at some places it also the amount of input tax credit which has been wrongly distributed by the ISD. So one thing we need to understand that under Section 122, fraudulent intention is not required in each and every case, right? So if we will read Section 122, different parts of it. Pramod ji, if you have mentioned Section 122 also in the PPT.
Yes.
Let us have a walkthrough with this section. Because हमने पहले वो पढ़ा होगा, कई बार पढ़ा होगा, and I will say कि 122 is very complex, and when we read it, this Section 74, it becomes even more complex. But अभी 122 को after this judgment, or once we are discussing this judgment, एक बार उसको go through होना हमारे लिए it's very important. Next slide please. जहाँ से 122 start हो रहा है, एक बार वहाँ पे ले जाओ उसको please.
I've kept it very short and crisp here.
No worries.
Section. Yeah.
No worries. No issue.
So basically, Section 122, which talks about penalty of certain offences, and it starts with wording says where a taxable person who. So basically, Section 122 is applicable for any taxable person. What does that mean is this section prescribes penalties for various offences, which is primarily 21 kinds of offences that has been prescribed here. and which is primarily aimed at discouraging fake invoicing, collecting tax but failing to remit it to the government within stipulated time, and failing to deduct or collect tax as required, or irregular utilization or distribution of ITC without actual receipt. So basically 122 was mainly implemented to discourage these fake invoicing or other kind of offenses that was prescribed under section 122. And
One
whereas,
second.
yeah,
I'm sharing my screen. Actually, I have prepared one summary of 122, which will make it easier to understand. One second. I'm sharing my screen only for this particular section.
sure, so I'll unshare, right?
Is it visible? My screen is visible?
Not yet.
No, madam.
Okay. अच्छा मैंने share नहीं किया हाँ, now is it visible?
Yes,
Section 122 वाला ही चार्ट दिख रहा है ना अभी?
right.
हाँ. So first of all इसका ना मतलब एक ओवरव्यू हमारे माइंड में ना क्लियर है ना, दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज व्हाट विल हैपन कि जजमेंट में ना कभी वो वन ए बोलेंगे कभी कुछ बोलेंगे तो हम लोग को फिर एकदम से कनेक्ट नहीं हो पाएगा. सो इसका एक ना माइंड में क्लैरिटी बिल्कुल. So 122(1) में there are list of 21 offenses. First of all, applicability wise, I have divided it. So 122(1), this part is applicable on taxable person. Then 122(1)(a), it is the person who retains the benefit or at whose instance. So any of these two. In third, it is applicable on ECO. That is totally irrelevant for this particular case. Then supplies of goods where tax is not paid, short paid. So it sounds repeated because the same thing is also covered in 74, and somehow this same issue can also be covered in section 122(1). Then 122(3), that is the last part of it. It's a general penalty of I will not say general penalty. There's a different section for general penalty. But there is again a penalty of 25,000 for some of the offenses, some of the things which may also be sounding repetitive because these kind of things are also covered in some other parts, some of these. So 122(1) कहाँ पे applicable हो रहा है? So first of all, taxable person पे for what any of the 21 offenses, penalty, what is the penalty? 10,000 or amount of evasion, whichever is higher. So यहाँ तक it's very clear कि okay, amount of evasion
Voice is not clear.
So those parts are also covered. So it will not always be the 100% of tax, short deducted, not deducted, deducted but not paid. So I have written it as TSD, TND and TNP under section 51. So 51 में TDS का provision है, तो उसके तीनों aspects are covered here. Then all tax short collected, not collected or not paid, मतलब collect किया but pay नहीं किया by ECO, उसको भी cover किया है. So in each and every case, this is what I am trying to tell you, that in each and every case of 122, it is not necessary that there should be some kind of tax evasion, right? So it may be applicable for defaults or for offense. So the question in this judgment is also that whether there should be a requirement of fraudulent activity for 122, because what happened in this particular case, the proceedings of section 74 were dropped. So 74 के प्रोसीडिंग ड्रॉप होने का मतलब है कि कोई भी फ्रॉडलेंट इंटेंशन या कोई भी उनकी साइड से मिसरिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ व्हाटएवर जो भी उसके 5-6 एस्पेक्ट्स है 74 के, कोई भी उनके अगेंस्ट प्रूव नहीं हो पाया. So the contention of the appellant was that जब 74 ही मेरे अगेंस्ट प्रूव नहीं हो रहा, इसका मतलब मेरा कोई फ्रॉडलेंट इंटेंशन था ही नहीं, then the penalty of 122 can also not be levied. तो यहाँ पे we are talking about the 122 and 74, both of those on a same person. तो जनरली हम बात करते हैं थर्ड पर्सन पे, जैसे कोई जो एबेट कर रहा है उसको, या जो लोग मीडिएटर थे, कुछ जो प्रोफेशनल्स होते हैं उनकी बात करते हैं जिसने रिटेन किया बेनिफिट. बट इन दिस पर्टिकुलर केस दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द सेम पर्सन, जिसपे 74 भी हुआ और जिसपे 122 भी उन्होंने सेम ही पर्सन पे लगा दिया. सो आफ्टर दिस 1A उतना ज्यादा रिलेवेंट नहीं है, तो इसलिए उसको मैं बहुत ज्यादा भी नहीं कवर कर रही हूँ. ठीक है. सो आफ्टर दिस आई थिंक नाउ वी कैन कम बैक टू प्रमोद जी. प्रमोद जी, अब आप जजमेंट का जो पोर्शन है आपका, नाउ यू कैन एक्सप्लेन इट.
Okay, thank you. You need to share.
Once I'm stopping. Stop sharing this.
You see my screen? Not
Yes. No, it's visible.
Okay, so I think as Sefali ji said, so let's go through the facts of the case. So as we have mentioned, this case was filed by Patanjali Ayurved Limited in Allahabad High Court. Basically, Patanjali Ayurved Limited is a well-known FMCG brand. They operated 3 units located at Haridwar, Uttarakhand, Sonipat, which is Haryana, and Ahmednagar, which is in Maharashtra. DGGI, Ghaziabad, upon intelligence, they started some investigation on suspicious transactions, alleging Patanjali was involved in circular trading of tax on paper without actual supply of goods, and thereby facilitating wrongful ITC claims by the Patanjali Ayurved and the units of the Patanjali Ayurved. Therefore, DGGI issued show cause notice proposing a tax and penalty under section 74 and also a penalty under section 122 totaling to amount 273.5 crores. And this penalty under section 122 was mainly related to issuance of fake invoices and irregular ITC utilization. Subsequently, during the adjudication process, the department dropped the tax demands under section 74 after finding out that all the commodities or quantities sold by Patanjali were always more than the quantities purchased from these suppliers, and ITC availed was found to be accurate and based on the actual supplies. Hence, they dropped section 74 tax demand. However, they continued with penalty proceedings under section 122 against Patanjali's Haryana and Maharashtra units because they said that these units have claimed higher ITCs. And Patanjali challenged these continuation of penalty proceedings under section 122 on the basis or on the argument that section 122 penalties are criminal in nature and can only be imposed after a criminal trial and not by the departmental officers. So basically, there were arguments given by the petitioner and the senior advocate appearing on behalf of the petitioner or Patanjali gave the argument that levy of penalty under section 120 of CGST Act attracts criminal liability and does not impose a civil liability. And section 122 cannot uphold its integrity subsequent to dropping of proceedings against the same person under section 174, and which is the basis on explanation 1.2 of section 74. On the contrary, the arguments that was placed by respondent that section 120 of the CGST Act was a civil liability and it is not a criminal liability, as penalty in a taxation matters or statutes is a civil liability. And they also said that on abatement of proceedings under section 122, the person is still liable to penalty under section 122, and if that person violates the provisions of the CGST Act. So both the parties put the contrary submissions or arguments, and basically the questions or issues before the court was whether the proper officer or adjudicating officer has the power to adjudicate the penalty provisions under section 122 of the CGST Act, because they said only criminal courts should be having power to put penalty under section 122, and whether the dropping of proceedings under section 74 will also abate the proceedings under section 122. So these were the two moot questions that was placed or to be dealt by the court in this particular issue of judgment. I think Sefali ji went through section 122, which was mainly for prescribes for penalty of certain offences, and the question was whether proper officer is authorized to do that order under section 122. So that is derived, I think there are rule for 142 which empowers the proper officer to issue notice in section 73, 74, including section 122. And they have said that that notice should be issued electronically in form DRC-01. And similarly, in subsection 5 or subrule 5 of rule 142 prescribes the same thing. On the other hand, section 74 is basically determination of tax not paid or short paid or erroneously refunded. where it appears for the proper officer. So proper officer is specifically authorized in section 74, but section 122, rule 142 has that prescription. Whereas on the if we go through the section 132, again I have put in a very brief here. 132 is punishment of certain offenses, and that prescribes various terms of imprisonment, which means by way of criminal trials, some imprisonment will be put on the offender for the punishment prescribed under section 132. So this judgment then in detail discussed about definition of offenses and penalty, because the claim that was made by the petitioner that this offense is criminal in nature, hence the criminal courts are only eligible to try that and put the penalty or offense on the same. So based on various judgments or legal dictionary definitions, the term offense was said that it has several meanings. It may be used in a statute to indicate a crime or crime of a lesser grade or an act not indictable. But the offense is a punishable summarily, which means by way of trial or by way of imposition of a penalty. Again, another definition talks about offense as any act committed against any law or any omission where the law requires a particular action would be equivalent to an offense. Honorable Supreme Court also have dealt this issue in various cases and says that offense generally implies infringement of public duty as distinguished from mere private rights punishable under the criminal law. Furthermore, a failure to do something may be described as an offense, though no criminal sanction is imposed, but merely a pecuniary sanction recoverable as a civil debt is prescribed. Whereas on the other hand, penalty, which is again discussed in various legal dictionaries and judgments of Supreme Court and High Court, is used very loosely in statutes in some cases and may be held to embrace all the consequences visited by law for an infringement of law. Penalty is ordinarily becomes payable in a taxing statute when it is found that SSC has willfully violated any of the provisions of the taxing statute that is covered under Supreme Court judgment in the judgment of Associate Cement Company or SAC Limited versus Commercial Tax Officer. On the other hand, penalty is ordinarily levied on the SSC for some conduct or a deliberate violation of the provisions of a particular statute based on Pratibha Processor judgment again by Supreme Court. And in various places, it also says that penalty is a slippery word and has to be understood in context in which it is used in a given statute. So all these definitions and discussions and judgments that enumerate above that clearly indicates that the word offense does not necessarily under all circumstances mean a crime that is required to be trial by a criminal court. So in summary, that when a tax statute talks about offense and penalty, it generally amounts to a civil liability and not a criminal liability in general. Again, taking further, this judgment speaks about various rules of interpretation of a taxing statutes, and it says that in a taxing statute, one has to look merely at what is clearly said. There should not be any independent. There is no presumption as to text. Nothing should be read in, nothing is to be implied. One can only look at fairly at a language used in the statute. The courts may interpret the constitution of a provision in a harmonious manner by reading all the provisions together to gather the intention for the language employed, its context, and give effect of the intention of the legislature. So basically the context in which a particular provision is enumerated is very important, and the intention of legislature is also important. So in conclusion, the court infers that both section 74 and 122 being a charging sections are required to be interpreted strictly, and plain meaning to the word used therein should be provided by the courts. And any absurd interpretation that makes the charging sections unworkable should be avoided. That means if we say that section 122 can only be adjudicated by or to be decided by the criminal courts, that is something which will make it unworkable, because it is something to be decided by the adjudicating authority. And again, Supreme Court in Shivdat Rai Fateh Chand case in 1993 has said that with regard to the taxation matters in relation to penalty proceedings, it attracts a civil liability and it is not a criminal liability. So again, Supreme Court has also referred to a very famous say of Justice Olivier Wendell Holmes Jr., where he says that a word is not a crystal, transparent and unchanged. It is a skin of a living thought and may be very greatly in color and may vary greatly in color and content according to the circumstances and time in which it is used. So I think the most important rule of interpretation is context for which any word is used and the tone in which it is used. So it is the scheme of statute that determine whether for imposition of penalty there is a requirement of mens rea or not. And in summary, mens rea is not essential element for imposing a penalty for breach of civil obligation or liabilities. There can be two distinct liabilities. One can be civil and one can be criminal liability under the same act, which in this case is CGST. And when a taxing statute speaks of prosecution for those offences, mens rea or guilty intent is a sine qua non, which means it is mandatory if taxing statute is speaking of a prosecution under criminal laws or a imprisonment. In those cases, of course, mens rea is important to be proven. But where it is only the penalty or a tax liability, those cases mens rea is not important. It is just a violation of particular statute is enough to levy penalty for the same. At the end, the conclusion of the Honorable High Court was, since the petitioner is registered under the CGST Act, he will fall under the definition of taxable person, as mentioned in the very opening statement or section of section 122, and there is no need of that argument that section 73, if the section 73 or 74, the first taxes under 73 and 74 should be levied, then only section 122 is applicable. And even if person who are not liable to pay taxes under section 73 or 74 may very well be liable for penalties under section 122. So, and then it also says that penalty imposed under section 74 and 122 are for two different reasons. Penalty under section 174 is for non-payment of tax or where tax has been short paid or erroneously refunded, or where ITC has been wrongly availed or utilized, and which comes under adjudication process. Whereas penalties under section 122 are far broader and different actions or omissions that amount to contraventions or offences as prescribed under 21 offences that was prescribed under section 122. So basically what the court at the end, Supreme Court, Allahabad High Court says at the end that section 122 of the CGST Act has to be adjudicated by the adjudicating officer. It is not required to undergo prosecution. An abatement of proceedings under section 74 does not abate the proceedings under section 122, which are for completely different offences and reasons. And the writ petition thus was dismissed, and Honorable High Court also directed the respondent authorities to continue with the proceedings under section 122 of the CGST Act in line with the show cause notices issued. So that was in summary, the judgment that was given by Honorable Allahabad High Court in Patanjali Ayurved Limited case. So with that, I would ask Shefali ji or Vishal Bhai to put some thoughts and deliberations on this.
Yeah. So dear participants, broadly now as Pramod ji highlighted certain definitions which are cited in this particular judgment. So the question comes is why there is a discussion on these definitions. So important point to be noted is, as Pramod ji and even Shefali ji highlighted at the start, that this judgment has been pronounced keeping two major issues in line. So we'll start one by one for clarity of all the participants. So basically the first issue that is deliberated, for which all these discussions and points on the definitions of offenses and penalties have been done in this judgment, is whether the proper officer has the power to adjudicate on the penalty provisions which are made under section 122. So basically, what the petitioner's respected counsel was trying to draw out is that whether the provisions and the penalties provided under section 122 are criminal offenses and requiring adjudication, which is similar to what happens in criminal cases, that is only by the courts, or is it a civil liability which can be undertaken by the adjudicating authority, that is your proper officer itself. In drawing this particular argument, the learned counsel from the petitioner highlighted on one very important point, that when we read section 122, which is different from the other provisions where any type of actions has been provided, in 122, there is no reference of the term proper officer. So one thing which is highlighted by the learned petitioner's counsel was that 122 does not provide that these penalties have to be imposed by a proper officer. This is indirectly a hint given by the legislature that it has to be done through the courts, and proper officer does not have the power to adjudicate 122 penalty. Further, another thing which was strongly highlighted by the counsel in this particular point was that the term used is offense and the term used is penalty, which always implies that there has to be a mens rea and it always has a color of a criminal offense. However, this has been strongly countered by the other learned counsel, but the basic point is why these definitions were discussed in this particular judgment is to bring out what is the exact color and nature of the term offenses and penalty. And then in the concluding para, the conclusion on this particular point relating to that whether penalties and offenses are criminal in nature, the Honorable Court has very specifically mentioned that whether a penalty or an offense is a criminal one or it is a civil one, that should depend upon the context in which it is used in that particular law. And in many places, it has been used as synonym, it has been used interchangeably with fine also. So penalty has been used interchangeably with fine, and offenses have been used in synonym with mere mistakes. So it should not be so strictly or so rigidly interpreted that offense would always cover something which is criminal in nature. And this is how the first particular conclusion was given, that penalty and offenses, these as provided under the GST law, are not criminal and hence they can be adjudicated by the proper officer. So this is the first point and the conclusion. I'll request Shefali ji and Avinash Bhaiya to add to this particular point, and then we'll take the second point for more discussion. Shefali ji.
I think this is quite clear because when I was walking through the section 122, there also we can see that there are some of the instances which are covered in that particular section which are not of criminal nature, or which are not even which don't even need any fraudulent intention from the side of taxpayer. So if I say the short deduction of tax, so it may be because of some mistake also, and specifically for the input service distributor. If an input tax credit is wrongly distributed, so it may be by mistake also, right? So I don't think that 122 is having any inherent fraudulent intention from the side of taxpayer. So it is
Correct.
more of a kind of penalty. And it was also mentioned in the judgment that in circular number 3/3 2017, 122 section is not covered anywhere. So from that, non-inclusion of this particular section, Arvind Lataji, he took a conclusion that for this particular section, any officer of GST is not a proper officer, because it is the intention of law that it should be prosecuted in the court. So it will be done during the prosecution. So prosecution and the proceedings of 122 will be aligned with each other. But for that, it is also clarified that section 74 itself says that in case of the proceedings of section 74 are dropped against any taxpayer, then they say the proceedings of 122 will also automatically drop. I'm talking about the other person, right? And here the problem is that it was for the same person. And but for section 132, they have specifically mentioned that it will not conclude any proceedings under section 132. So law itself is making a distinction between section 132 and 122. So section 74 is clarifying that. So I think this conclusion is almost correct. That I will not say correct, but yes, we can draw this particular conclusion. But yes, non-inclusion of section 122, that is also a valid point. It is not included in circular number 3/3, 2017. So this question can still be raised that there is no proper officer for this particular section. But the thing is, it is already included in section 74. It's being routed through that. So, but there is a confusion, Vishal, because if it is supposed to be routed through 74, why you have mentioned a separate penalty of 100% in 74 also, right? And the section 122 also. So there is, I will say some kind of anomaly in the whole drafting, at least.
Right. So the first point that we are deliberating on is that whether the penalties under 122 as provided are criminal or civil in nature. Yes, Avinash Bhaiya, your views on this?
First thing, let me honestly admit that I have not gone through this judgment and I have not applied my mind. But yes, as a student of law, what I can make out from the discussions, whatever is happening, that the question which was posed before the Honorable High Court was whether section 122 and the offences which are listed therein are the offences which are of the criminal breach or criminal nature, or those are of civil nature. Because if it is of a criminal nature, as mentioned by Shefali ma'am, that it has to be tried by the courts, and therefore it will have to be read along with section 132. First, the trial will be completed, and if there is a punishment, then the penalty of 100% can be levied under section 122. That is one way of reading it, which is coming out from the discussion and the judgment, I think. But when it comes to a civil liability has a greater impact, I would say. Now, let us read section 74, or let us try to analyze section 74 vis-a-vis section 122. As per me, both these sections are independent sections. So therefore, the argument that the proper officer term is not used, I have an answer to that. I'm not sure whether that answer is there in the order or not, but I have a strong belief that that answer is also one of the probabilities or one of the options. First, section 74 says proper officer. The implementation of section 74 is via rule number 142. If we read rule 142, sub-rule 1, capital clause A, it says, clearly says, if I'm not wrong, or sub-rule 1, let me just, it clearly says that it has to be a summary notice has to be issued along with notices under these sections. It includes section 122. So therefore, proper officer requirement is there as per rule 142. Now the argument can come that it is a rule, it is not a law. And in section 122, the word proper officer is not there. That can be one of the arguments or one of the counters which can come. Just a minute, let me just see. This is 142(1) clause A. It says notice issued under section 52, 73, 74, 76, 122, 123, 124, 125, 127, 129, 130. So multiple, all these sections are given there wherein it is saying that the proper officer shall serve. Then let us go to section 127. Let us have 127 again, because I personally believe that there cannot be a show cause notice under section 122 very strongly. And I have argued also this before the Gujarat High Court, which was not appreciated. But section 127 is very relevant. It says power to impose penalty in certain cases, where the proper officer is of the view that a person is liable to a penalty and the same is not covered under any proceedings under section 62, 63, 64, 73, 74, 74A, 129 or 130. He may issue an order levying such penalty after giving a reasonable opportunity of being heard to such provision, to such person. I personally believe this, I am not sure whether this was argued or not, that section 122, 123, 124, 125, 126, all these sections are imposing penalty. But the order imposing penalty or levying penalty cannot be issued in section 122, 123, 124, 125, 126. It has to be issued under section 127. And 127 starts with the word proper officer. Meaning thereby that argument of proper officer, that since the word proper officer is missing in section 122, and therefore it is to be supposed as the criminal proceedings or criminal offense may not be hold the water. As an alternate, I am making this submission. Maybe the court would have given the another reasons which you already have discussed, but this is also one way of looking at it. Now, let us go to the second understanding of mine. To be very honest, section 174 has to be read in isolation with section 122. Section 74 is applicable only when there are 4 situations: tax not paid, tax short paid, erroneous refunds, or willful or wrongful availment or utilization of input tax credit. These are the 4 situations. So if a show cause notice under section 74 is issued for any of these 4 situations, and a penalty under section 122 or 123, 124 or 125 is levied in that particular show cause notice or proposed in that particular show cause notice, then the moment I pay or I comply with section 74, may that be 74(5), all the proceedings are dropped of all the sections including 122 except 132. That is what the provision is. Meaning thereby only qua these 4 instances. If it is beyond these 4 instances, meaning thereby any other offense which is listed in 21 offenses of section 122 subsection 1, then that becomes an independent proceeding. And that can go on, even if 74 proceedings are dropped. That is how I will read it. And therefore, both the proceedings are independent, and 122 can certainly be taken care of, or it can certainly be proceeded with, even if when 74 liability is dropped or 74 proceedings are dropped. Number 2, I am of a personal belief, like this is the way I read the law, that mens rea or the intention is not important in taxing statutes. And this I've included, like I was just having a word with Pramodji also. And yesterday also, I think there was a session of Train the Trainer. I've said the same thing. There is one book authored by me, and it's one of my best books, Appeals and Litigations in Indirect Taxes. A new version is going to come now, maybe next month. In that, I've specifically included this discussion that whether mens rea is mandatory for imposing a penalty under tax law. The answer is no. See, even if you do not have the intention of defrauding the revenue, but since you have committed an error, which is an offense under the statute, the penalties or the fines which are applicable will be levied. You cannot say that I was not having any intention to defraud the revenue, but the error has been committed because of a mistake or maybe clerical mistake or whatsoever. If there is a fine, for example, you cannot file return because of some technical error, and you file return after 15 days, they will levy the fine. The fine is mandatory. And therefore, as per me, unless the discretion is given in the law, which unfortunately it's not given. Let us read section 122 once again for my clarity also, because even I am also confused now. So let me again go through this. It says he shall be liable to pay a penalty of 10,000 rupees or an amount equivalent to the tax evaded or tax not deducted under section so and so, or short deducted so and so, but not paid to the government. Meaning thereby there is no discretion given to the authority. It says whichever is higher. So if the amount is higher than 10,000 rupees, that will be the amount. There is no discretion that up to this, or a range is not given. If a discretion is not given, it becomes mandatory. It is a mandatory penalty, and therefore if I am falling within this offense and the department has discharged the onus or discharged the burden of proof, that yes, you have committed this offense, then admittedly or inadvertently, intentionally or unintentionally will make no difference and the penalty will be leviable. This is my reading of the law. Thank you.
Great. So I think we all concur on this particular point. So let me then now go to the second important aspect, which I think is of a wider implication, because this particular second aspect has implication in many of our other proceedings as well. So the question is that whether dropping of proceedings under 74 is by itself a conclusion of proceedings under section 122 as well, because in this particular case, as Pramodji listed out at the start, in the initial part, the notice was issued under 74 imposing 74 provisions. However, during the course, there was an adjudicating order passed which dropped all the proceedings and dropped all the allegations of 74. It only continued the penalty of 122. So the second question that is now posed in this particular writ, and which has been also deliberated and decided upon in this particular order, is that whether there is a connection between 74 and 122, whereby if 74 is dropped, the other proceedings would also be dropped. Now, in this particular point, there is one very important point which is discussed, that is explanation 1, clause 1 to section 74, where it is said that, I'll just read it there. So explanation 1, yes, says that where the notice under, one second, 74, yes. I'm reading the explanation which says that where the notice under the same proceeding issued to the main person liable to pay tax and some other persons, and such proceedings against the main person have been concluded under section 73-74, the proceedings against all the persons liable to pay penalty under section 122 and 125 are deemed to be concluded. Now, this was one of the contentions raised by the learned counsel from the petitioner side, that since you have dropped the proceedings under section 74, hence also section 122 is not maintainable. To this, the Honorable Court in its judgment order has mentioned that this explanation applies where there are multiple people covered in the same proceedings, like generally in case of fake invoicing cases, where if the proceedings of one person, that is the main accused, is concluded under 74, which would be concluded after the paying of tax or reversal of ITC and the relevant penalty, then the penalty which is levied on the other counterparts would be dropped, or it would be presumed that the proceedings have been concluded. Now, in this particular judgment, the Honorable Court said that this will apply, this relief given this explanation would apply only to the other persons, not to the same person. Here, since it is the same person on whom 74 was invoked, and then later on it was dropped and only 122 was retained, hence that explanation is not applicable. However, here, I believe that there is one more provision which needs our consideration, that is section 75(13). I'll read out 75(13). It says that where any penalty is imposed under section 73 or 74 or 74A, no penalty for the same act or omission shall be imposed on the same person under any other provisions of this act. So this is one more point which we have to, maybe if required, we can include the deliberation, that can 74 and 122 be parallel? 1. 2, like in this particular case, which is the main point of contention, that if 74 is dropped or the 74 is concluded, it cannot result in the conclusion of 122. This is the 2 points that I think we can take up for the deliberation in this particular part. Shefali ji, your views on this particular part of the order, the second question. Shefali ji.
आप म्यूट पे मैम.
Yes. So we talked about 75(13). It says where any penalty is imposed under section 73 or 74, no penalty for the same act or omission. So the important part is same act or omission. 74 is very clear. It is only for 5 things: tax not paid, short paid. But when we will see the structure of 122, it also include many other offenses, right? So in same type of transaction, so if it's a transaction of fake invoicing, there can be two different kind of offenses, right? So one part of that whole transaction is falling under section 74, that is the tax not paid portion, and the different part of it may be falling under section 122, which is not directly the one which is falling under section 74. So if I say section 122 says like if you receive any supply without invoice, right? Or you supply anything without an invoice. I mean, supply without invoice or invoice without supply. So in section 74, it's not directly written. I mean, in a single transaction, there can be both of them. So I'm making a supply without the invoice. My intention is for the fake invoicing, and tax also skipped on the same supply. And that will happen in each and every case, right? So tax will also skip because I'm not making a proper supply, the supply plus invoice, both of these. So now the act or omission, it's a part of same transaction, but actually its nature is different. So what is written in section 122 is also happening in the same transaction, and what is written in section 74 is also happening in the same transaction, right? So in section 74, I am recovering the tax also, plus I am recovering the penalty for not paying the tax or short paying the tax or taking an erroneous refund or whatever. And under section 122, I am taking a penalty that is also equivalent of tax amount, tax evaded, or like whatever, tax evaded. I won't use this word because there are so many different words there, right? So there is also another penalty which is for the different aspect of the same fraudulent activity. So I will say both can applicable simultaneously, but I will also add one more practical thing into it. Generally, department doesn't include section 122 against the main accused, because it was an understanding that against the main accused there will be 74 and for the other accused there will be 122. But after this judgment, what I can foresee, there will be a lot of cases where, because in 122 there is not even a time limit. So there will be a lot of cases. Now for the settled cases of section 74, department will raise 122. That's my view for it. Avinash.
Yes. Now, first and foremost, I will say that they issued a circular, I think 171, wherein they have clarified the bogus invoicing and all those offenses, and how it will be out of 74 and how it will be covered within 122. So therefore, we have to analyze and evaluate and examine from that angle. See, in this particular case, if I'm not wrong, the petitioner, in his case, the 74 proceedings were dropped.
Yes.
Now, therefore, 7515 is not applicable because there was no penalty imposed under section 73 or 74, and therefore 122 was very well admissible and applicable. And that is the beauty of that circular, I would say, and that is the smartness of the government now. Because imposing a penalty under section 74 will give only 100% of the tax sought to be evaded or ITC wrongly claimed. Because say, if I am, let's say, making a input tax credit of 100 crores and using that 100 crores wrong input tax credit, I am making a payment of 101 crores. So there is no short payment of tax. There is no short payment of tax. It is only wrongful availment or utilization of input tax credit, which will be 100 crores. So in under section 74, if they issue a show cause notice, if I fall within that question number 3 or whatever is the question in that circular, then they will be issuing an order to me of 100 crores, wrongful availment or utilization of ITC, plus 100% penalty, either under section 74 or maybe under section 122 subsection 2, plus interest. This will be the order. Now, if they do not make me fall into that and they say that your purchases were bogus of 100 crores, so they will go and put me into section 122 subsection 1 clause 7. And then they say that you have issued invoices without underlying supply of goods of 101 crores tax. Then they will issue a section 122 subsection 1 clause 2, 101 crores. So it will be 201 crores of the penalty. So what I mean is, or I would foresee would be that section 122 is a draconian power, a draconian provision, wherein 100% under each clause can be levied or not. That is the question to be answered. That is the important question, that whether if I am falling into the 5 clauses, there are 5 offenses under which I am getting fitted. So can they levy 500 times of the same amount? Let's say the amount is 100 crores and I am falling into section 122, 12, 122, 17, 122, 114, 122, 113, for example, and 122, 121, whatever. So there are 5 clauses of section 122 subsection 1 under which I am getting fitted. So can it make it 5%, 500 times? That is 100 crores as 500 crores of the penalty? The answer as per me would be no. And that is exactly where the department is not applying their mind. They will raise a show cause notice for 500 crores. They will pass an order for 500 crores, which is not permissible. Because the law says if you are falling into one or any of these 21 clauses, there will be a penalty of 10,000 rupees or the amount involved, whichever is higher. So the amount involved is only 100 crores. So therefore, it cannot be more than 100 crores as per section 122(1). This I have discussed with many departmental senior officers also, and they are also of the same view as I am having. But we have seen the orders. Rather, I am arguing many orders before the Delhi High Court and Gujarat and Bombay High Court, wherein they have passed, like, of a case of 100 crores has become 1200 crores because of section 122. So that is not permissible. But as per me, if I come back to this particular judgment, then yes, section 74 is invocable when 4 situations are there. And now when I come to the explanation which was read by my learned friend Vishal, it says when it is concluded for the main person, then for all these persons who are there in the same proceedings will be dropped. Now let us see how it is getting concluded in the law. Section 74 gets conclusion into 3 situations. 1, when before issuance of show cause notice, I pay tax, interest and 15% of the penalty. 2, after issuance of show cause notice, but before adjudication, if I pay tax, interest and 25%. 3, after issuance of the order, if I pay tax, interest and 50%. Only in 3 situations, the law is contemplating that the proceeding shall be concluded. If the order is passed, I have not paid 50% of the penalty, 30 days has lapsed, then I would say that the proceedings are not concluded. And if the proceedings are going on, because then the appeal will be filed and some other things will happen. This does not mean that the order has been passed, meaning thereby the proceedings are concluded. As per me, no. Unless it becomes final, unless it reaches finality, unless it becomes an admission, we cannot say that it has reached finality. And since it has not reached finality, all the other proceedings against the persons who are there for the same proceedings will continue, as per me. So we'll have to place on record that, look, main person has accepted that 74 liability. He has paid this along with interest, penalty and 15%, 25% or 50%, whichever is applicable. And therefore now the proceedings are concluded, and therefore the proceedings of the other person needs to be concluded as per this explanation. Otherwise, it will not be applicable. This is what I read for. And in this case, in Patanjali, since there 74 itself was dropped, it was not concluded. It was dropped. So dropping of a proceeding does not mean conclusion as per me.
Oh.
Because we cannot read out of the statute book. Statute book has used the word very, very cautiously, word concluded, and they've repeated it 3-4 times in the same section. So therefore, it was not concluded, it was dropped. And once it is concluded as per the provisions of the law, then we can argue. But in my case, in the case of Patanjali, that is the petitioner, 74 was dropped, but 122 can certainly continue. That's I have already stated. Thank you.
Avinashi and Vishalji, I had one thing into it. Like, if the proceedings of section 74 are dropped, so there is, like, according to the order, there is no tax evaded because proceedings are dropped under section 74. So I think in 122 also the maximum penalty can be only of 10,000 rupees because 100% of tax will be zero in this case. I mean, I'm just trying to see whether there is any scenario in section 122 where this still the penalty amount can be more than 10,000 rupees. Is it possible in any scenario? Because for section 74, if tax is not payable, then penalty should be maximum of 10,000 rupees only.
Yes, Vishal bhai.
Yes,
Chalo,
I do agree to this particular point. So that is why when I was reading the order, I was trying to figure out from where they have computed the amount of penalty which is continuing in 122. So I was reading the order, I found an interesting part that they have even mentioned the grounds on which 74 was dropped. And in the grounds, they have listed out that they could not find any discrepancy in the stocks, they could not find any purchases from NGTP. Now, the interesting part is that if these are the grounds for dropping the 74 proceedings, then on what basis have they come out with the amount of penalty which they are proposing to levy under 122? So yes, I do believe or understand that yes, that if proceedings are dropped and not they are concluded, proceedings are dropped, it means they are even dropping the allegations. Now comes the main question that if we say 74 and 122 are independent, then can there be a scenario of the main person where this is important, where for the main person there is no tax evasion and still there is a penalty? And two, can there be a scenario where there are multiple persons? Because see, we are also looking at 122 not from the same person's point of view, but from other person's point of view who can also be part of that particular misdeed. Now, in case of other persons also, the question is, how do you find out the amount of tax evaded? Whether it is tax evaded by the main person, which will become penalty for the other persons, or there has to be some tax evasion by the other persons also. Like when we say that there is abatement, in that particular case, how to read 122, whether it will be read independent of 74 or independent of any section, because again, that point will come, how will you find out the tax evaded? So yes, my understanding is, answering your question, Shefali ji, that there has to be some tax evasion by the person on whom this penalty of 122 is proposed. And if there is no tax evasion allegation on the person, then the question is, how will 122 survive? Yes, Avinash bhai.
see, I have a different view. Reason being, offense is an act. It has nothing to do with the amount involved. For example, stealing property, stealing cash, chori karna. In that case, even if if I'm stealing something, I'm getting a control of something which is not belonging to me, and when I'm caught, I refund it back. That doesn't mean that there was no offense. There was an offense. There was an act of offense, and since the act was there, either with the culpable mind or without culpable mind, I'm not going into that I've already shared, because the mens rea is not important. If I'm falling within any of those activities or actions which are defined as an offense, I'm of the view that the penalty will be applicable. And let us see the provision first once again. He shall be, I'm reading the concluding part. Let us read very carefully. He shall be liable to pay a penalty of 10,000 rupees or an amount equivalent to the tax evaded. In this case, you are saying 74 dropped, there is no tax evasion, correct? Or the tax not deducted under section 51 not applicable, or short deducted, or deducted but not paid to the government, or tax collected under section 54 or short collected. Now see, or collected but not paid to the government, or input tax credit availed of, or passed, or distributed irregularly. We are covered here. We are covered into the input tax credits wrongly availed, because those were the bogus invoices as per the allegations. See, please understand. Section 74 has nothing to do with this action. 74 in this order, if we read, they are saying there is no stock discrepancy. The department is not able to make out a case wherein they can say that there was some stock discrepancy was there, or there were some suppliers whose registrations were cancelled. Everything was placed on record. Affidavits were there, everything was there. So therefore, there is no scope of any doubt with regards to the short payment of tax. But when it comes to input tax credit and when it comes to the allegation that the allegation has been posed wherein they are saying that you have received the invoices and you have given the invoices, it will be covered into this: getting an input tax credit fraudulently and passing on the input tax credit fraudulently. Let us read it again. Or input tax credit availed of, or passed on, or distributed irregularly, or input tax credit claimed fraudulently, whichever is higher. So 10,000 or that 237 crores or 100 crores, whatever, whichever is higher, so that will be applicable, sir. You cannot say because 74 is dropped, so this will not be, because I have conducted and read the section first. First line, it says where a taxable person who. So in this case, the petitioner is the taxable person. He has issued invoices without underlying supply of goods. So that is an act which is covered under the offense. So even if there is no tax evasion or even if there is evasion, whatever is the amount involved in that act, either that amount or 10,000 rupees, whichever is higher, will be the amount of penalty. That is how I read it. थोड़ा सा जनरली मैं क्लाइंट के फेवर में बोलता हूँ, यहाँ पे लॉ के फेवर में बोल रहा हूँ. But this
Avinash,
is how law has to be read.
no, there is one question. Like, if somehow the input tax credit is not eligible, then it will fall flat in 74 also.
Absolutely correct. Then 122 will not survive because 74 is invoked, penalty is invoked. Once a penalty under section 74 is there, then it will go into 7513 once you are admitting and paying it. Then
That's
122
one more
will.
question. This is the case of circular trading. What I was trying to say, like in case of circular trading, let's say I just wanted to increase the turnover of my company. So the goods were also, invoice was also proper. The only thing was I was circulating it to my 4-5 companies because I just wanted to increase their turnover. But the movement of goods was there, like payment was there, everything was good. So I think, can this case still be falling in 122?
No. Then it is a good case. Then it is a case which is absolutely within the four corners of the law. Law never says कि A B को नहीं दे सकता, B C को नहीं दे सकता और C से वापस नहीं हो सकता.
भले
That
मेरा
is, I
वो
have
कुछ
done. If I have complied with 16 to all the conditions, then nobody can stop me.
Right.
Circular trading, what is department persuading or like formulating is A has given to B only invoices, B has given to C only invoices, C has given again back to A only
Got it.
invoices. Then if we are squarely covered, then 74 is applicable or not does not make any sense. See,
Right.
if I buy the argument, then that 171 goes, circular 171 goes, because there is no tax evasion, meaning thereby no penalty. No, that is not the case. If I've entered into an act which is an offensive act, then certainly the amount which is involved or 10,000 rupees, whichever is higher, is the amount of penalty which can be levied on me. Then I can very well argue this. But law is written in this fashion, and therefore 122 is very dangerous provision. It is very difficult to for a consultant like us to come out of section 122 if any of these offenses are proved. विशाल एक नया तरीका दिया ना पढ़ने के लिए.
That is the beauty of being a student of law.
Absolutely. And that is how difficult it is to read a law. अविनाश किसी दूसरी तरीके से पढ़ता है और विशाल भाई किसी दूसरी तरीके से, शेफाली मैम.
Yes,
The beauty of these sessions of Ashwaligal.
correct.
Because we gave a different perspective to all the participants.
And we argue with ourselves to give the
Yes.
different dimensions, because it is not necessary that between us also we may agree to something, but that brings out some new aspects.
Absolutely.
I think there are no questions in the chat box. No.
1 second. I got one question from someone in my personal chat.
Yes.
By Sudeep ji. Sudeep Kumar Gupta ji. And I have pasted it here. He's saying that some of the offenses under section 122(1) and are also present in 132(1). Can the taxable person be charged under both of these sections? One section is monetary penalty and other is prosecution. So he's just trying to say whether it will be double jeopardy prohibited by the
No, it is
Constitution.
not. It is never double jeopardy, ma'am. Because if we read IPC, there are many offenses wherein the fine as well as the punishment both are there.
Both are there.
And at times it is or fine, like punishment of 5 years or fine, and at times it is punishment and fine. So both can be applied.
Mhm. Right. I have one more question regarding this. It's a different question. So let's say there was a case of fake invoicing, right? So what they did, they were not procuring the proper supplies. So मैंने क्या क्या सिर्फ invoices लिए, but for my particular delivery, so I was also one of the buyer, but my transaction was genuine. Just to deliver to me, what they purchased some other goods from the like local, I will say local market without invoice. तो मतलब इधर से वो क्या कर रहे थे, सिर्फ invoices ले रहे थे. बट मुझे सिर्फ डिलीवर करने के लिए कुछ उनको जेन्युइन भी रखना था, तो उन्होंने क्या किया, विदाउट इनवॉइस कुछ लोकल मार्केट से परचेजेस की and they delivered to me. So from my part, I was never being aware of it कि उनकी साइड से कुछ fraudulent है because I received the goods. Now, section 16(2)(c) also is a particular word. It says that subject to the provisions of section like 41(5) whatever, the tax charge in respect of such supply has been actually paid to the government either in cash or through utilization of input tax credit admissible in respect of such supply. So क्या
I got
इस
your
केस
point.
में मुझे 122 की
I
पेनल्टी?
I got your question, ma'am, and this is how 16(2)(c) is challenged and admitted by various courts only on this point. Otherwise, they are not agreeing because under VAT also the similar kind of provision was there. But when it says that admissible ITC, so how would I come to know that whether his ITC was admissible or not? That is not my duty. So to that extent, it may be read down by the courts. This is what we are anticipating. Because let me share one instance. It is officially, and it is already there in the Gujarat High Court side, that when these matters were being argued, at that point in time, we were arguing this before Justice Padiwala. So he indirectly have conveyed that I am going to read down this particular law to this extent. But unfortunately, because of the other side was not available and the arguments could not take place, and then he was elevated to the Honorable Apex Court, this could not be decided. But finally, this is how it has to be decided, because now whether it is admissible or not, after 5 years, you will say that his suppliers were bogus. So therefore,
Yes.
your IT or your 16(2)(c) compliances are not there. Now you reverse your ITC. That is not going to sustain.
This
As
is
per me.
happening because अभी वो क्या सप्लायर का सप्लायर और कस्टमर का कस्टमर वो भी देखने लगे हैं.
Or take up all those cases, we'll defend it. Take all those cases, we'll defend it beautifully. I'm very sure about it.
Sure. So Vishal ji, any other question?
There is
No, ma'am.
one. Rajesh Jain ji has raised a hand. So he
Okay.
wants to ask.
We can unmute him.
I have asked him to unmute. Rajesh ji, please unmute yourself.
I think we'll have to unmute him.
No, we have to ask him to unmute, but he's not.
राजेश जी आप अनम्यूट कर पा रहे हैं अपने आप को?
Or it may be my mistake.
Maybe.
Rajesh ji,
Anyways.
आप टेक्स्ट कर सकते हैं अगर आप नहीं अनम्यूट कर पा रहे तो. आई थिंक मे बी ही इज नॉट ऑन द स्क्रीन.
ठीक है.
Anyway,
Pramod ji.
any other questions or anything else?
Okay. So I think
There's one another hand also, some DV.
yeah, maybe EV. I'll ask him to unmute.
Hi, good evening, sir. Anchal this side.
Arre. What a pleasant surprise, ma'am.
Hi, it was pleasure listening you all. I think
And
so. Shefali raised a question which even I was very confused about. Sir, dropping of 74 on the ground that we have to go for 122 makes sense. Because in one of our cases also, previously department levied 74 and 122 both. Then they said, okay, we drop 174, but 122 will continue on the charge that there has been evasion of tax. But in this particular case, 74 was dropped on the ground that there has been actual movement of goods. The purchases were exceeding the sales made, and there is no doubt as to the movement of goods. Then how 122 can be levied?
ma'am, what I can, we do not know the exact facts, but what I can say is there can be one example that in all metal industries it is happening that they have received the goods. But the law says that the invoice, the person who has issued invoice, he should have sent the goods and you should have received the goods from the same person. Now there may arise a situation wherein I have received the goods from Mr. X and the invoices on which the ITC is claimed is issued by Mr. Y. We never know what is the situation in this particular case, but that can be one of the situations wherein the department is not able to give any stock differences and they are not able to prove that there was no movement, but they are able to prove that the Y who has issued the invoices on which you have availed the credit is not the person who has supplied the goods. That can be one of the reasons because of which 122 will survive, not 74.
Right, sir. But sir, in this case, the situation was not like this because this case which you have referred is particularly covered in case 2 of Circular 171, which says when goods are coming from one person, invoice coming from another person, the proceedings will be carried on under 74. Because उनको ITC भी वापस लेना है और उनको आपसे पेनल्टी भी लेनी है, तो वो दोनों चीजें 74 में लेंगे.
Correct.
ये सर्कुलर ट्रेडिंग का अगर केस है या अदरवाइज आप चैलेंज करते हो कि भाई अंडरलाइन गुड्स और सर्विसेज नहीं थे, तो ये 122 में जाएगा. अब 122 में जाने के लिए ये भी तो प्रूफ डिपार्टमेंट को ही करना था ना कि भाई अंडरलाइन गुड्स और सर्विसेज है ही नहीं. वो 74 ड्रॉप कर रहे हैं स्टेटिंग कि हाँ अंडरलाइन गुड्स और सर्विसेज हैं. जब है तो फिर तो कोई ऑफेंस ही नहीं हुआ. जब ऑफेंस ही नहीं हुआ तो फिर पेनल्टी किस बात की?
मैम वही मेरा कहना है कि कोर्ट के पास लिमिटेड क्वेश्चन था. Court has addressed only 2 questions.
Right.
Court has not addressed this question that whether the supply was made from the same supplier who has issued the invoice. This is discussed in this. मैंने तो order नहीं पढ़ा है, but I hope विशाल जी and शेफाली मैम ने पढ़ा होगा. But I have not read the entire order. But जितना भी मैंने पढ़ा उसमें ये facts मेरे को आया नहीं सामने.
सर अभी सर ने स्टार्टिंग में जो स्लाइड शेयर की थी ना, I read that fact from that slide only where he stated कि जो परचेजेस हुई थी वो ज्यादा थी. एज अ रिजल्ट उन्होंने कहा कि 74 ड्रॉप हो जाना चाहिए. Am I right, Pramod sir? It was there.
Yes.
Ma'am, it is there. What I understand, as we all know that in writ orders, all facts are or everything which is part of the writ is not mentioned.
Is not
So there is
mentioned.
what I understood when I also read for the first time, I also had the same question. But when I read it second time, I understood that there could be multiple allegations, out of which one which is under 122 relating to this circular trading is continued. And yes, you are rightly mentioning that there are points on which 74 is dropped, in which one of these points is that the goods have been actually received, or the transport also, all those points of transport also has been mentioned.
Yes.
I believe that that could be the other grounds which has been sustained, and on the basis of it 74 is dropped, and this part which is continued under 122 is altogether a different transaction. This is at least what I could figure out, because in my first reading I also had the same query.
Even in the order I have never read that what were the prayers. So maybe the prayer was never made that the order should be quashed.
Yes.
There was a prayer that 74, 122 and 74 cannot go simultaneously.
Yes, that might be an issue because comprehensively taken, if they are dropping it on the moment, then 122 should not have been there.
Very true, sir. Very true, ma'am.
Yes.
Very true.
Right, sir. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much, Ashwa Legal, for this wonderful deliberation.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you
ma'am,
very much
for being there. It's a pleasure and a motivation for us now.
No. It's my pleasure.
Sir is also there. If he can also add something, because he messaged.
I just got a message that people are unable to put chat and even unmute themselves. So I think there is some technical. That is why we are not having any question in the chat.
1 second.
I'll just
chat.
confirm.
Chat is blocked. This is what I just got a message.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Now
Rajesh.
you're audible. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
So please go ahead with your query.
All right. I think my video has been disabled by the host, so I'm not able to open my video, but it's good that I'm audible. See, my question is basically one. We have discussed about circular number 171, and Nashji has discussed about those various serials number of those circular number, point number 3, which has been specifically clarified by the board that the person who is doing only invoicing and there is no supply of goods or services, neither he is entitled to input a credit, nor there can be any demand either under 73 or 74. The question is, like in the case of Patanjali, they had done away with the duty demand. No tax was demanded under 74. but the penalty was confirmed, for which the matter went to the High Court. In such a case where duty is not demanded or tax is not demanded, can prosecution under 132(1)(b) or C be launched only for the penalty if the department imposes penalty? That is my question.
Ji, sir, as per me, yes. The answer lies in section 132 itself. Because tax, they are not defining the tax evaded or the amount. See, if we read section 132, clause 1 of subsection 1, it says
Yes.
shall be punishable in cases where the amount of tax evaded. So as far as the tax evaded is 0, or the amount of input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized, or the amount of refund wrongly taken so and so 5 crores with imprisonment of so and so. So when they are alleging that the ITC was not as per the provisions of the law, and therefore 122 is applicable under section 122(1) clause 7, so they can simultaneously invoke section 132 also. This is how I read, because I also argued initially that since there is no tax amount involved, it is only penalty, 132 cannot take place. But when we read carefully the term tax, because the explanation is there. If we read explanation to section 132, it says, for the purpose of this section, the term tax shall include the amount of tax evaded, or the amount of input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized, or refund wrongly taken under the provisions of this act. We are covered here. The state goods and services, IGST, so and so, and cess levied under so and so. So therefore, wrongly availed ITC, if there is an allegation which stands and it is adjudicated against us under section 122 clause 7, then I am of the belief that 132 can be proceeded with. A prosecution can
No,
be
but the
launched.
point is, sorry, can I say something?
Please, sir.
What I want to emphasize is that if it's a wrongful availment of credit, see, there is no supply of goods or services.
Correct.
So supply chain is, there is the basic element to attract GST is either supply of goods or services. Nothing of that sort is there. So you're out of the scope of supply under section 7. Charging
Correct.
section under section 9, tax is only on supply, nothing else.
Correct.
You are also not demanding any tax from me, because if it's a wrongful availment of credit, 74 gives the power to the proper officer to recover that input tax credit which has been wrongly availed. But if a
Correct.
person is not at all entitled, because section 16(2) speaks about the entitlement. So if a person is not at all entitled to input tax credit because there is no goods, then, and you are not making a recovery, then what would be the wrongful availed credit? That is the point which I want to understand under 132, even by the explanation.
Sir, I'll give one example. I'll give simple one example, because this issue can be debated for longer time. But I have already explained what I understand. But I'll give one example, that the person has entered into a premise of another person without authority and trying to steal something. But he could not steal and he has to leave the place. Now, the action of entering into a premise of a third person without permission is also an offense. Similarly, even if there is no supply, since I have availed the input tax credit, which was not permissible to be availed, and I have passed on that input tax credit by way of a fake invoice, this becomes an offense, sir, even if there is no supply. So therefore, 132 is applicable as per me. Maybe I'm wrong. This is what I am interpreting. So, by that means they can invoke the prosecution provisions. But very well, we can go and argue before the trial court that this is not applicable.
That
which
is
we
right, because there is a
which we are already
distinction
doing, sir. Which we are already doing, and we are trying to defend our clients.
in serial number 2 and 3. There's a distinction, because serial number 2 of the board circular says that B has availed the credit, A has issued the invoice, B has availed the credit on the goods because B has supplied the goods. So
Correct.
there is a wrongful availment, because against the invoices issued by A, who has not supplied the goods, B has availed the credit on the goods procured from somewhere else.
Correct.
So that is a wrongful availment of credit. And that's why the credit can also be asked, he can also be asked to reverse the credit. But kindly see serial number 3, why the department is not asking for the tax if the credit has been wrongly availed. That should
I
have been
agree.
also been a criteria for the department to recover that tax which has been wrongly availed. But they are doing away with that. So
I fully
for
agree, sir.
74, it is not wrongful availment. For 132, it is wrongful availment. Just because the penalty is there.
Correct, sir. I fully agree with you. I fully concur, and rather we are arguing on the same footings before the courts wherein the trials have been started by the magistrate court. But the way it is being interpreted by the department is like this, because the act has not defined the word tax evaded, or maybe the tax. So that is how they are saying that since you are falling into 122, 1 clause 2, 3, 7, whatever, it will be also invoking section 132. That is how
If you will see that para 45 of the judgment of Allahabad High Court in Patanjali, the last two lines, they say, they give a reflection with respect to the prosecution as well as penalty. If you just go deeply down into that specific para 45, I will not take much of your time. You can deliberate on the other issues.
I have not. No, sir. It's a learning, sir. But actually, I have not gone through the judgment to be honest. Because हमारे यहाँ vacation चल रही है, sir. We are enjoying that vacation.
It doesn't matter. But I will speak to you later on. If you just give a thought to that, the para which has been quoted by the honorable bench, honorable court.
Yes.
After referring to compounding under section 138 and referring to the proviso.
Right, sir.
The court says last three lines. That is, something which is mind-boggling.
Okay. Starts from upon a further reading of the chapter.
Just the last three lines of para 45.
Okay, the above proviso is an indication that the legislature
Right.
never intended to treat 122 as an offense prosecutable and punishable by way of a criminal trial.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
132 need not be considered for 132, 122.
So if the department is only asking for the penalty,
then
can
they cannot.
132 go side by side for penalty?
Very true, sir. Agreed. We can now take help of this judgment while defending
I
our
leave it to
claims.
you because you have been
This will
doing a
help
number
us,
of
sir.
matters before various high courts. So you can throw light on this subject,
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks a
so
lot.
much.
Sir, I'll also contact you for this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Avinash ji,
Ji, sir.
Virender Chauhan here.
Ji, sir. Please, sir.
Rajesh ji is a very senior lawyer of High
Sir, I
Court.
know him, sir. I know him, sir.
So
Delhi High Court se hai. I know him very well.
I just wish that probably no one is well prepared today on the decision, and this decision is having a far-reaching impact on all of us.
Correct,
And
sir.
certainly this matter will go to Supreme Court. The kind of counsel is there, the Tar Sahib in this case. So
Correct.
if quickly this meeting can be rescheduled for some other day, and we can invite Rajesh ji also as a speaker, then probably
We can do it next week, sir.
we can go through the para or the contentions of the appellant as well as the defendant.
That
And
will be
then-
better, sir. Even I'll also read the judgment. I will be prepared.
And then we can go through first the decision part, and then we can critically examine that what could much more be discussed in this decision, because notification number 2/2017, circular 171, mandate of 74, and whether other than those 4 or 5 limbs of 74 can at all be invoked through a circular 142. There are so many limbs which are open for discussion.
So,
And next
Rajesh
time,
sir is there.
instead of 60 minutes, if 120 minutes can be kept, this is my request. Thank you, sir.
Sir, if Rajesh sir is there, if he's ready, then we can keep it on 13th, sir, next week, next Friday. Vishal bhai, kar sakte hain?
13, I have 4 cases fixed on 122, covering about 150 crores penalty.
Oh, okay.
Where Patanjali is clearly applicable. Other than 13, just look at some other day. Rajesh ji and me both would be participating actively on those.
Done, sir. तो सर राजेश सर से एक बार आप डिस्कस करके डेट आप बता दीजिए सर. विल कीप ऑन द सेम डे.
मैं राजेश जी से बात करके आपको अपडेट करता हूं.
डन सर, डन. ठीक है सर. थैंक यू सर.
अविनाश जी, फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ ऑल, मैंने कुछ पैराज इसकी चैट बॉक्स में मैं क्या सेक्शंस भी जो हम रीड कर रहे थे वो पेस्ट करती रही. अभी आंचल मैम का भी इशू था ना, इसमें जो पैरा 44 है ना, जहाँ पे कोर्ट ने अपना ऑब्जर्वेशन दिया है कि 122 हो सकता है, नहीं हो सकता। आप इफ यू विल रीड पैरा 44, उन्होंने स्पेसिफिकली इस केस के फैक्ट्स के हिसाब से नहीं बोला, उन्होंने इन प्रिंसिपल बोला है
करेक्ट करेक्ट।
कि आप 122 और 74 को अगर देखोगे, दे स्टैंड फॉर द डिफरेंट फुटिंग्स एंड डिफरेंट ग्राउंड्स। सो उन्होंने बोला है कि इट्स पॉसिबल कि वो हो सकता है, बट इसके फैक्ट्स एनालाइज करके ये नहीं बोला कि इस पर्टिकुलर केस पे हो सकता है कि नहीं, बट उन्होंने बोला कि इट्स पॉसिबल, क्योंकि जो अरविंद तारी थे उन्होंने आर्ग्यूमेंट किया था कि ये पॉसिबल ही नहीं है, वो उन्होंने वहां पे क्लेरिफाई किया। तो पैरा 44 एंड 51 दोनों में ही वो पॉइंट्स क्लेरिफाई होते हैं।
डन डन डन।
सो अपार्ट फ्रॉम दिस एनी अदर क्वेश्चन कोई है भी किसी का? विशाल जी,
एक बार वीरेंद्र सर की डेट आ जाती है, then we'll arrange this again.
डेफिनेटली we can do it again. और अच्छा है कि फिर हम
Anyway,
लोग
there are-
what we will do,
there are
we'll
couple of
also
more
keep
judgments.
discussing.
Yes, yes. Even
So
we
we'll
can
also keep everything handy.
touch on that circular also in detail.
हाँ, वही सर्कुलर भी फिर हैंडी रखेंगे, वो भी साथ में ही इनकॉर्पोरेट कर लेंगे हम लोग इसके। सो आई थिंक अभी टाइम भी हमारा हो चुका है, काफी ज्यादा हो चुका है। सो कैन वी कंक्लूड? विशाल, आर यू देयर?
Yes.
So with the concluding remarks.
So I thank everyone for firstly your presence, and yes, I thank Rajesh ji, Virender ji, Anchal ma'am for their active involvement and value additions. Yes, on the special request of all these learned faculties, we are definitely planning the second round of this with more insights on the other aspects of this decision. Today, we focus more on the decision verbatim, like how the law says that while interpreting, you have to go by the words. So today we went by the words of the order. Next time, we'll go to the constructive interpretation of this, whereby we'll try to delve into the other aspects of this order as highlighted by all the people present over here. So I thank everyone present, and yes, we will definitely come back with the second edition of this particular issue. And
Vishal,
till then,
before we end, some of the participants in WhatsApp, they requested me to post the copy of judgment. I have posted it. So if anybody wants to download, please download it fast, because once the session will be over, you will not be able to download it.
And even we can do one thing. We have a YouTube channel now. Ashwa Legal has a YouTube channel. So
Yes.
with this we'll also add the link there of the order. So all the
Yes, yes.
participants can go and subscribe to that YouTube channel also, because it is
Right.
live and it will be all our versions, all our discussions are being uploaded on the YouTube.
yes.
Chali.
Okay. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you so much, Arvind. Thanks, Vishal ji, Pramod ji, Avinash ji, and especially Achal ma'am, Virendra sir, and Rajesh ji. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.